We also have integrations, and we also have the ability to pull IP camera feeds. So we are working right from the client's camera that's already in existing infrastructure. The second that we are putting this on a client's network, we're making sure that it's meeting all their standards, right? We're not worried about a cloud. We're not worried about any other hosted service, third parties, things of that nature. Beyond the operating system, the robust aspect, it's a hardened, locked down computer. So this thing's going to be exposed to the public in these elevators. So we make sure that there's no risk, no vulnerabilities there. I mean, ultimately, these clients, when they have the infrastructure, the teams that are already focused on it, they really get into it early on when we start these conversations. They want to know what it could do, what it can't do, the whole nine, and then we design it together.
Sure. You had mentioned some of your other customers that for them, security is a huge deal, right? And so them wanting to kind of own it, control it, so that they can make sure that everything is totally secure makes a lot of sense.
Right, exactly.
Hello, and welcome to Elevator Tools and Tech, a special series from the Elevator Careers podcast, where we spotlight the latest innovations, tools, suppliers, and technology driving the vertical transportation industry. In each episode, we sit down with the creators, engineers, and solution providers who are helping elevator companies work smarter, safer, and more efficiently. This episode of Elevator Tools and Tech is brought to you by LiftComm, a product of Tech Solutions and providers of high-end elevator emergency communication systems. I met with Joe Barone, Senior Client Manager. We discussed their audio and text communication solution in compliance with ASME 17.1 codes that allows speaking or hearing-impaired people to communicate in case of emergency. We discussed the progression of elevator emergency communications, the rigorous testing processes for these devices, and available integrations. Learn more at liftcomm.com or email Joe at jbarone@techsolutionsinc.com. Now, let's dive in. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. Excited to talk about your product and honestly, get to know LiftComm a little bit better. So, first question I have for you is, kind of for the listeners who've never heard of Tech Solutions or LiftComm, what problem do you solve in the elevator world in plain English?
In plain English, what we solve at LiftComm is we help to satisfy an ASME 17.1 code that in short, it requires that inside the elevator, if someone's trapped and they hit that call button, not only is audio supposed to pass through now, but also text messaging in case a passenger is visually impaired or speech impaired. So that's going to help me code, and that's something that we've actually helped develop and have been rolling it out through the country over the last few years.
Yeah. Well, and your elevator story actually starts outside of elevators. Tell us how the MTA relationship led you into IP intercoms and two-way communications and ultimately into elevators.
Yeah, absolutely. So our story does go a couple decades back, actually. Early 2000s, Tech Solutions started as just a security engineering company, mainly focusing on a product line called CyberLock that you see above me. It's an access control system that we implemented through a lot of state agencies and a lot of end users, but ultimately we got into MTA around mid 2000s. And then just through our relationships, we were a solution provider for other options. So come 2015, they decided to swap their intercoms from analog to IP. So they approached us for a solution. We submitted one, and we ultimately won. And now we have thousands of our IP intercoms throughout the MTA, New York City Transit, Long Island Railroad, the whole infrastructure. So that was actually, a great relationship that we have. So we've been doing that now, call it about 10 years. And then come 2019, I had mentioned earlier this code that now there's this requirement for text messaging as well.
Right.
So, we're already in there. They approach us again. And rather quickly, we were able to develop a system. It's called our EAV. It's an example of what it would look like on a panel. That is the system that actually can text back and forth with yes and no answers, meets the code. And arguably, we were one of the first to meet this code, just given the way that it was rolled out into New York. Got a few hundred of these now every day growing. They're doing a very nice job with ADA improvement plans through all the subway stations. So a lot of these in the field and continuing to grow.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you were kind of right place, right time with the right technology when they said, hey, can you essentially add this piece? It's like, boom. Yeah, we can.
Yeah. I mean, it was something that it was as an engineering company and consultant, security, it's our focus. And we said, yeah, we'd love to take a crack at that. It's exciting. We like to make new products, make new solutions. So yeah, it was a really great opportunity.
Yeah. And you've talked to about your approach as kind of higher end, even Rolls Royce.
Mhm.
I may have used that term, right? But what does that mean in real features and outcomes?
True. Yeah, I'll say we say Rolls Royce, we say the higher end ultimately because of that opportunity we had with the clientele that had a high standard for what they needed in their infrastructure. Anytime you work with a state agency and authority that they want something that's proven and built around their requirements.
Right.
So of course, us being the ones to provide that solution, we were given this opportunity to really develop a solid system. So, for example, our hardware, our operating system is Linux. It's a hardened operating system
Okay.
compared to the alternative. People use general purpose boards, Raspberry Pis, things of that nature. We also have integrations and we also have the ability to pull IP camera feeds. So we are working right from the client's camera that's already in existing infrastructure. Ultimately, it's something that's proven the test of time, especially over these last few years. We've been in there since 2019. And reliability, security, these were some of the headlines that needed to be met. And that's ultimately where we satisfy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you've kind of pointed at some of that equipment behind you. Can you kind of walk me through a little bit of the
Mhm.
communication process? You mentioned the panel on
Yeah.
my right, your left, but what else is there?
Yeah, you got it. So we'll actually work backwards here. So this is an example of what you might see in an elevator cab on the
Hmm.
COP. Usually above the floor buttons, the open and close. You got the screen, 7-inch display. Could be touchscreen, but we actually put a protective cover throughout the MTA. And some of our other clients just vandalism. Um,
Sure.
Ultimately, if that button is pushed, it's kind of it's going to ultimately go to either a command center. A lot of our clients have inside command centers, so it could go to a phone, it could go to a workstation. But in between here, the wiring is actually quite simple. So what we actually like to do is it's an IP device, PoE device. That's
Right.
how it's powered. That's how it gets communication. As when it comes to the install, all you do is you take a twisted pair off the traveler cable, and it actually converts into IP in the cab. So you
Wow.
have this
Okay.
black box right in the panel. And then in the machine room, we have an enclosure that would house the other end of that. It's called a two-wire device. That's then going to turn it back to IP. And behind me goes to a network switch, either in a comm center or down the hall in a data center. So when it comes to the actual install process, we've got guides and some videos, but relatively, not too much equipment to make this actually work.
Yeah. And you kind of talked and touched on some of these pieces, but walk me through a little bit more about kind of the back end architecture, like
Mhm.
the on premise server, PBX. What does those actually mean, and why would a customer care or say, hey, yeah, I want that?
Right. Yeah, I'd say that's a good point. That's definitely one of the larger things that set us apart from the rest is our offering for a total solution, meaning the client can own everything outright. We have our UCM, we hand over to the client, and that's their server, that's their PBX, that's everything that they own what's called on-prem. It's within their
Gotcha.
network.
Hmm.
They own it. No cloud subscription services. They don't have to worry about any infrastructure outside of their four walls. That people like that usually with the higher security. Um, Usually the end users have their PBX teams. They have these teams that are focused on having that higher standard. And again, security is always going to be the forefront of that. But yeah, it gives the client an option just to own everything outright. We of course like to maintain it. We have different agreements. We want to be there as a support factor, but oftentimes we set it off for success out the gate.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like if they've already got teams in place, if they've already got a similar structure, they probably just want to roll it into what they're already doing and own it, like you say. Which kind of leads me to a next question, because you have said to me in a previous conversation that security is really a big part of the first conversation you have with new customers. And so I'm curious, what makes your solution more secure?
Mhm. Well, the second that we are putting this on a client's network, we're making sure that it's meeting all their standards, right? We're not worried about a cloud. We're not worried about any other hosted service, third parties, things of that nature. Beyond the operating system, just the robust aspect, and it's a hardened, locked down computer. So this thing's going to be exposed to the public in these elevators. So we make sure that
Sure.
there's no risk, no vulnerabilities there. That would be mainly, I think, the huge factor. I mean, ultimately, these clients like you said, like when they have the infrastructure, the teams that are already focused on it, they really get into it early on when we start these conversations. They want to know what it could do, what it can't do, the whole nine, and then we design it together.
Sure. Well, and you've talked a little bit about, certainly MTA, and you had mentioned some of your other customers that for them security is a huge deal, right? And so
Mm,
I think them wanting to kind of own it, control it, know, all of the ends of it so that they can make sure that everything is totally secure makes a lot of sense.
right. Exactly. Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about reliability because you did mention the hardened Linux system. Tell me about the uptime standard you referenced. What did you have to do to achieve that?
No, you got it. Yeah. So a standard that we like to be held to, it's called the five nines. It's a 99.999% uptime, meaning that our devices in the field, they're going to be working, and it's not a matter of if this call button is going to be pushed. It's when this call button is pushed. It better go to that end spot.
Right.
So it's a standard that, of course, was passed down through our relationships with some of our government accounts that they want to see the highest possibility of standard met. So to meet that, ultimately the testing process is pretty robust. I mean, we ran these things for months on end. We stayed logged in. We exposed them to different temperatures. We put them kind of through the ringer to make sure that they're going to be able to fit these environments like a government agency, like a heavily trafficked area, better than most would. So it's gone through some pretty rigorous testing, and now we're reaping the benefits of that on this end now.
Yeah, no, that sounds kind of intense. I mean, I'm not a Six Sigma expert, right? But I remember hearing and learning a little bit about that in college, and that sounds like you've actually gone beyond that to make sure it's going to be up and running.
It's certainly, it raises the ears and the eyebrows a little bit in meetings. So when you say something like that, and when we mention Linux, we're on with these IT guys, they hear that, they get more comfortable about it. And I think then they get, like I said, like a little excited about it and say, all right, well, what can we do with this? What are the capabilities? Can it work with X, Y, and Z? And, they say, yeah, we love designing it with them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit about, some of the new prospects that come to you and have had bad experiences. Besides that they don't like maybe having a monthly subscription, what are some of the most common pain points you hear?
hmm over the years, we've heard just some feedback about reliability of the device, some screens not working. And then when it's time to actually swap them out, some difficulty with working them back into that infrastructure, getting them programmed, making sure that they're calling the right spot. So that's one thing that we kind of pride ourselves on when, if we are retrofitting a situation, then we're going to make sure we hear the customer say, all right, what were the concerns here? And kind of make them comfortable about, well, this is why we're not going to be in that situation. We even had one of our clients down south, it's an airport. They reached out even before the initial device was even installed.
Oh,
When they
wow.
started doing some research about it, they kind of saw the way that it's built and some of the infrastructure, the cloud aspects, and there it was a communications manager, and she said, "No, I'm not doing this." They found us online,
Wow.
and since then they've been amazing to work with. They've really into it. Like I said, they're one of those clients that actually care, and they bought
Sure.
right in, and now we're building, a real nice system with them over the last couple of years.
That's awesome. So you mentioned swapping out devices, like maybe while the system's still up and running, right? Being able to do that, and you had talked a little bit more in a previous conversation about kind of the white glove approach, like configuring
Mhm.
something before it even goes in. So you've already got it keyed up, and you just plug it in, and it goes. In addition to that, what are some of the things you do before it's installed? To make commissioning and installation easier.
I think that our main focus in the beginning, if this is a new project, an existing project, if a contractor comes to us, a fixture company comes to us, our goal is always to have a conversation with the end user. And this is mainly to take that onus off of the contractor because now they've moved to this IP computers versus an
Sure.
analog phone. So to provide that white glove service, it's speaking with those IT teams, with the end user, learning about their expectations, how they want it to work, their call routing. Where's the call supposed to go? If it's not answered here, it goes here, it goes to the next person. It could be pushed. There's a lot of different configuration aspects that we like to get after early so that when it is actually installed, it's plug and play.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that would be the main, I'd say, white glove service aspect. And then once it's installed, similarly, another client wanted to work out a SIP trunk where the phone calls 911 and it works through their PBX.
Well,
Then a couple days working with them, we got this set up. I don't think a lot of other people can offer that as quickly as we can because we're working with some pretty intelligent people that really care about the device, and we love it. I mean, we're engineers, we love working with them, finding solutions. So
yeah.
yeah, we're really into making sure we're responsive. We have a great support structure, and they're getting the system that they're designing for themselves. There's no one system for everybody, and
For
we're
sure.
open to that.
Yeah. Well, and obviously with the 2019 code, the device is no longer just a phone, right? It's a computer on the customer's network. There's a lot, obviously security, some of these things that maybe you didn't have to worry about when it was just a phone in an elevator.
Right.
Who should own this internally? I mean, you've talked about kind of the IT team. Obviously, your team is involved. It could be could be the elevator contractor. Maybe they don't want
Yeah.
to own it, right? But what would that
Right.
be ideally?
Well, for decades it was always the same thing, right? I mean, it's a 100-year-old industry, hundreds really, and then for a while it's always been the same thing. The phone is always part of the installation of the elevator, almost like a widget. And, it's an analog phone. It gets plugged in, calls, great, move on.
Sure,
Now that it's become more towards this IP computer based, ultimately, yeah, we like to speak with the end user. We need to kind of get in there, not to cut anyone out, really just to take it off their plate because it goes far beyond, I believe, their scope of
sure,
just installing something. There's a lot more to it. And we work in tandem with them, we work through them, we work directly with the client, whatever it is. But ultimately, I think it's a big change. The world is getting away from analog. The elevator industry, in some cases, they're still installing analog phones. So
yeah,
it's a very odd, approach, but we're trying to not only look ahead for the immediate future, but down the road, sustainability, reliability, the whole nine. So I think getting out in front of the end user is the only way to truly do that, to build those relationships with them and
for
take it
sure,
off of it. Otherwise, an industry, like we said, been around for a while. And we laugh too, because we've been doing IP phones, like I said, for over a decade now. But in the elevator industry, it's historically a very old industry. We listen to your podcast. You got guys on, generational guys
sure,
have been in this
sure.
industry. So as LiftComm now coming up with a focus, meeting this code, going to shows and having these conversations, and we've actually even gotten questioned like, "Where'd you guys come from? Like, who are you guys?"
Who are you?
Like it's odd to penetrate an industry this long. It's been fun. It's been interesting meeting a lot of these guys and girls, and it's really been interesting. So yeah, our approach is a little bit unique, but to answer your question, mainly, it would be reaching out to that end user and getting out in front of them early.
Right, right. Yeah, thank you. We talked a little bit about integrations and how your system can integrate with. You had mentioned, cameras, things,
Mhm.
but give me a couple examples, for our listeners of some of the integrations you have.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, it's a Linux hardened operating system, but we're still open source, right? So we have our own code, but we're SIP compliant. We have this ability to work with other systems as well. So an example for a software integration would be a lot of our clients, because they're state agency, public sector, they use a system called Genetec Security
Okay.
Center for their
Hmm.
CCTV systems. Uh, Genetec's done a great job penetrating the industry, so they're pretty common now. So we had one client approach us. They said, "Hey, we're using Genetec, and because we pull their IP feed, we don't have to install another camera. We use existing cameras if it's there." They say, "Well, we're using Genetec, and we want it a little bit easier if someone pushes that button to know that that camera is going to be stamped." So then we developed something called bookmarking,
Right.
where, in short, you click that call button in the elevator, it's going to stamp in the Genetec camera system that a call was placed. This is going to help make it easier if you go back for the footage. For whatever it be, you want to
For
go
sure.
recover that footage and know what happened. It's already there, so it takes out a lot of the time, makes things easier. Um, we've worked with other call operating systems, answering services. Viper. These different systems that people have to answer calls. We can work with them. And then I like to mention the hardware aspect. The back of our EAV here has a relay, simple, normally open, normally closed, that can tie into elevator monitoring services.
Cool.
So one specifically that we work very closely with is cloud monitoring. Bali, Angelo, those guys are great over there. And we've been working with them for a little bit. And essentially the benefit there is if this elevator phone goes down, network drops, power goes out,
Okay.
and it's UPS backed up, but let's say network drops, through the cloud monitoring system, alert will be sent out depending how that software is set up. Emails get sent out to the appropriate people. Cuts down on response times, improves overall operability. So we like to work with different people, different, especially different inventors, people with different ideas. We're open to it. If any of your listeners want to reach out, they have an idea that can integrate with a phone. we're more than open to that. So yeah, integrations are part of that aspect of let the client design what they want, and we're here to make it all work together.
Yeah.
So, we're definitely proud of that aspect of it.
And that sounds like a really smart idea because, if somebody's doing remote monitoring or somebody's, like you say, they're monitoring the cameras, they want to be able to have everything in one command center, be able to respond to it, act upon
Yeah.
it, find it. Uh,
That's that's a huge point. I mean, I think once you start adding more and more equipment into any infrastructure, so that we're using the elevator as an example, you already have an existing camera. Now you got to worry about maintaining another camera or surface mounted camera that really doesn't even look that satisfactory. It passes inspection, but tougher to monitor. If there's not an existing IP camera, typically that's our first approach. We supply a corner mounted camera because it has all those capabilities that I think a clean system would. And again, if you're not adding stuff, there's less points of failure, and it just makes for an overall cleaner system.
yeah, no, absolutely. So, you mentioned proactive supervision, TPS, continuously checking the communications path. What does that accomplish versus monthly testing, or I don't know what all the other processes
Yeah.
are out there, but
No,
talk to
yeah.
me.
So that's something that we've helped to design, and we're working on. We're still learning a lot about the industry, right? We're still figuring out. Everyone's kind of rushing to have a solution. One thing that we feel should really be highlighted is really having a good supervision of this line, making
Hmm.
sure that not if the button's pressed, but when it's pressed, that call is going to go through.
Sure.
So previously a little archaic, but you used to have people go out once a month, go press the call button, make sure the phone still works, something like as basic as that. We're developing ECPS, Emergency Communication Path Supervision.
Hmm.
Its focus is not only are these two devices talking to each other, meaning is that elevator phone speaking to, the call agent or the call center, but are there any other factors that might be blocking that call from going through?
Right.
Because remember, we're not talking about just a phone call over, a copper line. Now we've got internet involved. So not only is it going to check that I can communicate with this device, but are there any firewalls blocking it? Is the network still good? Any changes on any of the URLs, IP
Mm,
addresses?
okay.
So it's called SIP option ping, where ECPS is really going to continually be monitoring this stuff. Again, so the ease of mind for the people that do care, if you hit this button, what's going to happen? Now you got that peace of mind. And I think that's where the industry should be heading, putting a little bit more time and effort into this emergency device.
Right. Right. No, what comes to mind is essentially, kind of like remote monitoring for your elevator, but in this case, it's for your elevator communication system, just to,
Mhm,
and maybe, I mean, does this, let's say it goes down, I assume it takes a message, sends a message back to the,
mhm.
whoever's monitoring it, and says, hey, the camera's out, or the,
You got it. You got it. Yeah, a series of things happen. I mean, the code itself requires that if anything were to happen to this device, it trips the relay, and then you get an annunciator down at the landing, you get an LED, and the screen would display emergency phone unavailable. In addition to that, for the remote aspect, yeah, you're getting alerts out to the people that need to be reached, all different ways that, again, cutting down response time, making sure that this elevator is back up and running soon, because especially with the ADA community, people depend on these to
for sure.
travel. If an elevator is out, especially about the subway station, airports, transportation, really throws a wrench in their plan for their trip. So important that these things are well maintained and hardened and reliable, because they hold a very heavy weight as far as their responsibility as a device.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Joe, who is, and we talked a little bit about this, but who's the
Mhm.
perfect fit customer and who would not be a fit for your
Yeah.
system?
We really, our clientele over the last 5 years has heavily remained with the state agency, higher end government style, for lack of a better terms, the ones who really care about the security and what they're putting on their network. And typically it's been that little bit more higher end clientele that has some infrastructure that they want to meet. Um, People that care, really.
Yeah,
And I'd say for the flip side of it, we're open to having a conversation with anyone. Anyone that calls, we've truly never had a bad demo. It's always been educational and, oh wow, that's really cool, X, Y, and Z. But let's use a residential, for example. If
sure.
you have a small residential building that are just trying to meet the code, this might be a little too feature rich for your use case, maybe not as
Right.
cost prohibitive as an alternative might be. So we've actually had calls where we've had that conversation and say, yeah, this has been great, but we'd actually recommend, for lack of better terms, a competitor because
Sure.
we feel like their system actually really would help meet what you're looking for. So yeah, we like to we're looking for the higher end, the white glove service, the ones that we can grow and build relationships with versus just being, a widget and an elevator.
For
That's
sure,
never
for sure. When you'd mentioned, I think some airports, obviously the MTA. I mean, maybe a college campus. It's like, hey,
Mm.
this infrastructure has to be here, has to work, and not that some of the others don't, but if it's like you say, if it's just one, and there's not a team to kind of support it or monitor it or pay attention to it, um,
Right.
maybe that one doesn't make as much sense.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. We actually go around, I don't click them, but we've seen some interesting things in the field. You start to notice things more, right?
For sure.
I never would have thought 10 years ago I'm staring at elevator phones whenever I get in an elevator, but it changed the way you see the world a little bit. But there was one incident actually at a building over in New Jersey, and we'll show you the photo where their elevator phone wasn't even a phone. It was a walkie-talkie on the
Oh
handle of the
wow.
elevator that said, in case of emergency,
Use the walkie-talkie.
press use this walkie-talkie. And it really just helps further the idea that this is an industry. It's an ever-growing industry. It's a very old industry, but the phone aspect has always been so overlooked and kind of
Sure.
just been a forget about it style. And in that case, we actually tried to use the walkie-talkie. No one even answered. So things like that, I think the industry should be heading, and it seems to be heading in a more focused area that these devices shouldn't just be forgotten about or overlooked, especially in heavily trafficked areas. I mean, they're holding a lot more weight than ever. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Joe, if somebody's interested in having that conversation, how would they get a hold of you and your team?
Yeah, so I mean, you go to liftcomm.com. We have contact information there. Anyone that wants to have a conversation about features, capabilities, or like I said earlier, partnerships, different ideas that they feel would really help advance this product or even help their product, advance because of the capabilities over here.
Right.
Um, we we always say we're not a very salesy bunch. We're more operational focused and just demonstrations.
Right.
We love just doing demos. We do it here in this lab in this conference room here, simulate calls, and it's always a conversation. I think one thing that we've been really trying to focus on lately, in addition to reaching out to the end user and educating a little bit on what's out there and what your options are, we even have some great relationships with architects and consultants,
Right.
people that when they're designing these jobs, now we're giving them an option to offer this in their tool belt when they're having these conversations. This way it gets in early and now, we work with the fixture company and everything and it's all set up. And while that construction's being done, we can start having these conversations. So anyone, really encourage anyone just to reach out. There's a lot to learn. Like I said, the industry's still growing when it comes to this phone.
For sure.
It's relatively new. This code's relatively new in an otherwise 100-year-old industry. So 5 years, people are still trying to figure out what works, what people really want to see in their
Sure.
phones. And we're no stranger to that too. So we welcome conversation about it and we just really are into it and want to keep seeing it grow.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being with me today. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. No, thank you for having me. This is really exciting. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of these coming out. So I appreciate it, Matt.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks again for listening to the Elevator Careers podcast. Please remember to visit LiftComm. You can find them at liftcomm.com or email Joe at jbarone@techsolutionsinc.com to learn more. The link will be in the description below. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, stay safe.